All right, guys. So it seems like liberals are completely fed up with the Democratic establishment right now. And Cory Booker, the Democratic senator from New Jersey, recently went on the I've Had It podcast with Jennifer Welch over here, who is going to do an absolutely flawless job at confronting him on Aipac, on Israel, on the failures of the Democratic Party establishment, their unwillingness to fight or to lay out a coherent set of policies or principles. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this and brace yourselves, because Cory Booker is going to put on a masterclass here of the exact kind of politician speak and dancing around questions and refusing to give straight answers on simple questions that it seems like everybody hates right now. So let's go ahead and jump into this.
Well, we want to talk to you about, the country. And it feels like the Democratic opposition is just not getting it. There are votes that you've made that were heartbreaking to me, like the vote for Kushner. That really pissed me off, because I feel like this administration, it's not, are they fascist? They are fascist. It's not, we're on the precipice of fascism. We have Pritzker, Texas is sending troops to Illinois. And I feel like the opposition needs to be fuck no, across the board. We're not giving you a centimeter. And I think there's been a lot of capitulation. I think there's been a lot of Neville Chamberlain type appeasement from Democratic leadership. And you're one of them that's kind of been disappointing to me, because we podcasted before. They're serious about Project 2025. They're going to do all this shit. And they're doing every single bit of it. So what do you think? What do you have to say about the capitulation that you participated in and where the Democratic Party is right now?
Well, first of all, I would say very pointedly that one of the things I dislike about the Democratic Party is that we do a circular firing squad all the time. Their party, they do.
Okay, so the question there was very straightforward and simple. She's laying out votes that he has taken in the past that she disagrees with, as well as the strategic approach of the Democratic Party. And his response to that is essentially, you guys are being too mean to me. That's the real problem here, is that we have a circular firing squad where if you disagree with me on XYZ vote and you point that out, then that's detrimental to Democrats broadly. I mean, ridiculous answer off the jump.
There's wild disagreements in the Republican tent, and yet they don't shoot at each other. And we have a really good way of holding up these purity tests that if I agree with you on 95...
That's such bullshit. That is such bullshit. They fire at each other all the time. Trump has sent so many people out to pasture, so many people that he calls rhinos. Liz Cheney can tell you that they have the firing squad as well. It's not a purity test. It's are we in this fight, and are we being beholden to corporations and corporate interests, or are we really the party of the working class? And that's what I think the message is.
Two things I'll say. First of all, if everybody in your coalition agrees with you on everything, your coalition's not big enough.
And it's a cult.
If we don't have disagreements, then we're talking in an echo chamber. Thank God I sit in a caucus with people. I couldn't win in some of my colleague states, perhaps, but we have lots of different agreements, but we are united in the fight against Trump. And I'll say number two, which is really important, is that, we feel the existential urgency. And even though we don't agree on everything, I'm in the trenches with some of the best fighters I have.
Okay, so which one is it? Because a minute ago you were saying one of the main issues that you have with the Democratic Party is that there's a circular firing squad, and now you're turning around and saying, actually, we work across the board and we're united against Donald Trump. Which one is it? Now, the real answer to his proposition here is that, yes, Republicans do have a circular firing squad. It's just only based on Donald Trump as an individual, right? If Donald Trump personally doesn't like you, or if you cross him in any way, shape, or form, then he's going to destroy your life, right? Ask, as she said, Liz Cheney there, what happened to her? Ask Thomas Massie right now for daring to break from him on Israel and the genocide in Gaza. Ask how everything is going for him. If you dare to cross Donald Trump, then he will ruin your life. He will ruin your career. That's their quote unquote purity test. On the left, or in the Democratic Party, institutionally, within elected Democrats, they don't have that circular firing squad. Overwhelmingly, the Democratic establishment is unified on a pro-corporate, pro-business, sort of like pro-war kind of an agenda, right? And kind of tweaking the system around the edges and throwing a couple of bones whenever it might be necessary. But broadly, they agree on a lot of those things. The thing that he's actually referencing here in terms of purity tests, and this is the difference between what's happening with Trump and Republicans versus the Democratic Party, is that the purity tests are coming from their own voter bases. Like, do you take money from AIPAC, or do you support the genocide in Gaza and continuing to send weapons to Israel, which really isn't an unfair purity test. But that's what he's actually complaining about here. He's not talking about infighting within the upper echelons of the Democratic Party establishment. He's talking about his own voter base that is trying to hold him accountable, like Jennifer is doing right here, for his own actions, right? And there's a big difference between those two things. But now he's going to continue to go on and brag about how unified the Democratic Party is.
From veterans like Mark Kelly and Tammy Duckworth, who have, I know Mark's voted on some people I didn't vote for. So we may not be absolutist, but the fighters that I'm in the trench with right now, the sacrifices that they're making for this fight is pretty tremendous. So I have disagreements with a lot of people. Look, I'm one of a handful of people that don't take corporate PAC money. I don't understand my Democratic
What
Party.
about AIPAC money? You take AIPAC money, don't you?
A minuscule percentage of my resources come from
I read it's like 800,000.
Yeah, but that's
Okay, so he wants us to essentially brush off, as she was saying there, the $871,000 that Cory Booker has received throughout his career from the pro-Israel lobby. Nearly $1 million that we're talking about here. He just wants us to brush that off. AIPAC did this, and the rest of the pro-Israel lobbying organizations did this for the fun of it, right? With no expectation of anything in return. And by the way, this is just the money that was spent on his behalf. This doesn't include the money that could hypothetically be spent against him if he dared to break from Israel, which is something that we saw in the 2024 elections, where AIPAC spent over $100 million primarily against Democrats who were progressives and critics of Israel, people like Cory Bush and people like Jamal Bowman. So they have tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to spend against you if you dare to cross Israel in any way, shape, or form. He wants us to believe that all of this essentially amounts to nothing. But then we also have things like this. I mean, this was reported in The Intercept back in 2019. In leaked recording, Cory Booker said that he and the AIPAC president text message back and forth like teenagers. So again, which one is it? Are they completely irrelevant and you don't even think about them? Or are you literally texting with the president of AIPAC like a goddamn teenager? I mean, again, not exactly something you can just sort of brush off there as if it's not a big deal.
Lifetime number of raising tens of millions. Let me give you the right stat. The majority of my money comes from small dollar contributions. My last report, I think 76% of it came from people that gave $25 or less. So this to me is about, again, we could pick at each other, or we could do what we need to be doing right now, is joining in a chorus of conviction to condemn it. And again, I'm a child of civil rights activist. You think Malcolm X and Martin Luther King agreed on everything? No. Do you think Fred Shuttle?
Cory Booker just compared himself to Malcolm X.
In fact, Ella Baker had lots of criticisms about King. But when it came to the fight, they joined together and created a movement that was successful. And that's really what my focus is. And as the only person in the caucus that lives in a low-income Black and brown neighborhood below the poverty line. I still remember when some progressives from the suburbs came down to protest me, and they were literally chased away by my neighbors, because we are in an urgency. Every day I see it. We are in an urgency where real people are getting hurt. When I go up and down in New Jersey, they don't care about the fact that I took 1% of my money from some group. They care about, what are you doing to restore my health care? What are you doing to fight for my fact that I can't make rent? And in my caucus right now, we're standing up and fighting for those things and not capitulating, as you said, to Donald Trump's attempts to deny 22 million Americans health care, to see healthcare costs double for lots of them.
Well, I think the base feels like right now, and I know that you're in the Beltway, but I think the Democratic base feels like there is a disconnect. Like, we hear you, like when you did your 25-hour speech, I was like, go, Cory, I love this. That is amazing. And then there's a photo shoot with you with Benjamin Netanyahu. And I was just like, what in the actual fuck? Like, how can he do that? It was heartbreaking. I felt betrayed.
Yeah,
and hang on. And that doesn't just happen in an echo chamber. It's important when there are Democrats like you, where the base, we should make each other better. We need to evolve. And I love that you come on here. We need to have these conversations. It's not a purity test. We want credible messengers, because when we are down the middle and beholden to corporate interests, then we leave this vacuum, and that's how fascism has flourished. And so for myself and a lot of our listeners, when I saw the picture with Benjamin Netanyahu, I felt like it diminished your 25 hours. That's how it felt to me.
And that's such a perfect encapsulation of Cory Booker, by the way, because he gets up and he like sets this record in the Senate for a 25-hour speech. And you're like, okay, that's somewhat impressive, like physically even at the bare minimum that you could get up and do that. But then you look into it and it's like, he wasn't even doing this for anything. Like, he wasn't holding up a piece of legislation in a filibuster. This didn't accomplish anything other than, I guess, like sort of boosting his brand and maybe generating some sort of temporary, day-long energy around the Democratic Party. But like, it wasn't actually to accomplish anything. And then, as she says there, a couple of days later, he's in a picture with a bunch of other Democrats and Republicans and Benjamin Netanyahu. And by the way, if you're having a hard time finding where Cory Booker is, it's because he tried to slickly slide behind another elected representative back here because he knew that what he was doing would not reflect well with his own voters. So here he is. I mean, you got Chuck Schumer, you got all these other people here, and then he's hiding behind half his face here in this picture with Benjamin Netanyahu. And the core point here, as many people have been saying, is it's not just to say that like Israel-Palestine is the only issue, but it is a fair litmus test to say at the bare minimum, if you're not willing to stand against genocide, then you are not going to be willing to stand and fight for anything. You're certainly not a credible messenger if you don't stand against a genocide, and you're certainly not a credible messenger when it comes to things like fighting against Donald Trump's fascistic policies that he's implementing right now.
So a few things. One is, I work in the Beltway. I live in the Central Ward in Newark, New Jersey. Streets that a lot of folks tell folks, why would you demean and degrade my communities? I keep a little picture here of the first place I represented in 28 years old, which is a Black community that's struggling. And we've transformed our schools, our supermarkets, new parks, urban farms, and the like. And the wonderful thing about those folks that I serve is that none of them question where I stand and how long, for more than a quarter of a century, have I stood with the people in their neighborhoods. Number two, so I may work in the Beltway, but I know where I came from and I know who got me here. And it's the struggling people that our party has done a pretty shitty job for, to be honest with you.
I agree.
Okay, number two, when you say things like Kushner this and whatever, I remember the people who actually, when the Democratic Party was doing things like passing crime bills that put Black people like me, when I was in my 20s and stopped by the police all the time, behind bars, the Democratic Party failed and fueled mass incarceration. And so the people that were there for me 30 years ago, doing prisoner reentry programs, getting people jobs and housing, I'm sorry. People like Kushner, who was there 30 years ago fighting for those fights, I'm not going to forget that they fought for Black people when other people seem to be gung-ho with, hold on, let me
wait, is this the first CARE Act? What was that act called that you passed?
Well, that was only 2 years ago, the First Step Act.
What was that? Okay, I've read about that. That's really good. Yes, it's excellent.
And I'm sorry, I have to work across the aisle, and Charlie Kushner was, but for him, it wouldn't have gotten done. So when I go home, people do know people that got out of prison because of the First Step Act, and they knew the bipartisan coalition. Third, I'm sorry, I have real problems with Benjamin Netanyahu. Outrageous things that he's doing. The way you fight for those things is you sit down face to face with somebody and you fight with them. I'm not going to be outside of the room screaming. I want to look him in the eye, like me, Amy Klobuchar, and a whole bunch of other people did, and talk to him about humanitarian aid. And if people want to criticize me for it, then go ahead. But I'm leading in the Senate on West Bank crises.
Okay, the way that you stand up to Benjamin Netanyahu is not, in fact, to sit down and have a face-to-face, eye contact, friendly conversation with him. That's not going to change anything, and we know that because it didn't change anything. When was the conversation that you and Klobuchar had with Benjamin Netanyahu as they were enacting a mass starvation campaign and completely blockading the Gaza Strip for months and months and months? How did that conversation go? Was it effective? No, I mean, if anything, right now we're only seeing a modicum of an influx of aid because Donald Trump basically forced Benjamin Netanyahu into at least a temporary ceasefire. So the ways that you would actually confront Benjamin Netanyahu and bend Israel to do your bidding, or bend Israel to do the bidding of international law and follow in accordance with basic human rights, is you would use the leverage that the U.S. government has at their disposal. Things like completely cutting off military aid to Israel, a trade embargo, right? On top of that, implementing sanctions, or even just at the bare minimum, allowing international institutions to hold these war criminals accountable. Instead, the United States has been attacking the International Court of Justice. We've been attacking and sanctioning the International Criminal Court. Those are the things that you would do, right? Allowing the ICC to operate, allowing the ICJ to operate, sanctioning Israel, sanctioning Benjamin Netanyahu, not allowing him to step foot on U.S. soil to come and speak to Congress to resounding applause from a bipartisan coalition. You wouldn't be doing those things. You would be implementing basic restrictions on Israel to hold them accountable, to force their hand in this equation, not sitting down with them and having a goddamn face-to-face friendly conversation. I mean, what a completely ridiculous thing to say.
Right now, from their attempts to annex it or illegal settlements, I lead the legislation to sanction the people that are doing that. I can stand strong on my principles and still work to end these things. And I don't mind taking criticism Again, from folks that don't necessarily agree with my tactics. But we on this podcast right now, we share the same aim: ceasefire now, humanitarian aid now, return the hostages now. And
again, those things don't happen by magic, right? Those things happen with massive external pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and the state of Israel. It doesn't happen through friendly conversations or magically.
Do you think he's a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he's a war criminal?
Again, these are questions that a lot of people think are the important litmus tests that are loaded and hot. My urgency.
It's actually not loaded and it's not hot. It's a very simple question, right? He has been convicted. He has an arrest warrant out for him from the International Criminal Court for being a war criminal. So do multiple other Israeli government officials. It's a pretty simple yes answer. Not to mention, aside from the International Criminal Court arrest warrant, he has objectively committed countless war crimes in Gaza. I mean, you literally would have to put together a spreadsheet that is thousands and thousands and thousands of instances long in order to calculate the amount of war crimes that he has committed. Not only has he committed war crimes, he's committed the crime of all crimes, the worst crime that a government or a state can commit, which is a genocide. So to say this is complicated, this is complex, this is a hot, question that you're asking me, no, it's not. It's extremely simple. And this is what people fucking hate about Democrats right now, is you can't answer a simple question with a yes or no. It's not complicated. And anybody who says that it is either lying to you, or they're being dishonest, or they're in the pocket for the Israel lobby.
Is to be an effective leader in bringing an end to this crisis. And I get these questions all the time that to me undermine my urgency.
I think the thing that Democrats get so frustrated with, where we are right now, where you see like the Zoran Mamdanis and the Graham Plattners rise up, because they can go on podcasts and you can say, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? And they just say yes. And that's the end of it. It's not all of the rhetoric answering. It's like what happens to Democratic politicians, they go through this like prism, and then we can't ever get like the answer to yes or no conversations like you do with Bernie and others. And that's the frustration for the Democratic base with leadership. Do I think Netanyahu is worse than
Trump? Yes. Do I think that we right now in America should be doing everything possible to bring peace, not just to that crisis, but to the ones that shock me that no one talks about? And I hope, and I don't know if you guys have or not, but crises like Sudan.
Okay. I mean, just again, phenomenal case study into the tap dancing politician speak here from Cory Booker. She's demanding a simple yes or no to the question of whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. And he says, I'll give you your simple yes or no, and then changes the question into, is Benjamin Netanyahu worse than Donald Trump? And he says, yes. That wasn't the question. You just completely shifted the question so that you didn't have to answer the first one. And then he tap dances even further and starts shifting it to an entirely different conflict in Sudan. And he's like, why aren't we talking about this instead?
Where there are American weapons literally causing horrific, in fact, by double, triple, quadruple, it's the biggest humanitarian crisis that we're not talking about as a country. When I was coming up, everybody was talking about Darfur. Now the moral silence is outrageous when American weapons are being used in that conflict.
And the same with Israel. I mean, our weapons, and even Democratic politicians signed them before they were sent over to kill kids. I really feel like if we get through this fascism, we have to have conversations like this, Senator. I think
but you're right. Where you're right is the Democratic Party. Again, as a Black guy in America, there are so many things we don't talk about that we need to have an honest conversation about. You're right. I work in a place that corruption has been accepted. Why are people taking corporate PAC money? Why are people trading stocks? I hold myself to the standard of what I want to see other elected officials. If I was a guy in Newark that I talk to about that don't believe their politicians stand and fight for them. And so I agree with you that there are real corruptions that we tolerate that we need to do something about. Campaign finance is one of the things. This is why I do not take certain money from everything from oil company C-suite folks to pharma company C-suite folks. These are all things that I believe. But every day that I get up here, I know the people of New Jersey want me to fight for them and their interests. And so when it comes to the fights we're in right now, I'm happy to be in a trench with everybody in my caucus, from Mark Warner all the way to Bernie Sanders, the whole caucus. We are united in a fight right now that I'm hoping, despite the disagreements within the Democratic tent, that we all can unify and say it's outrageous for people's healthcare costs to double their premiums. It's outrageous for 22 million Americans to lose their healthcare. It's outrageous for hospitals to have longer waits at the emergency room because people are going there to get their primary care. I go home every day, as I told you, or at least every week, to my community. And a lot of the things that I often talk about on podcasts like this, they don't give a damn about. They want to know what's going on with my rising costs. What's going on with my loss of healthcare? What's going on with the poisoning of my communities? Because everybody wants to talk about them being an environmentalist, but nobody's talking about the toxic sites that are in communities like mine and community. What's going on with the fact that giving birth in this country is one of the most dangerous jobs you can have, especially for Black women? And so I hear you when I'm down here in the Beltway or get on podcasts, everybody wants to talk, well, you didn't vote 100% this way. Nobody asks me about that in communities that I'm fighting for in New Jersey. What they want to know is, what are we doing to make the American dream, that I can buy a home, that I can afford health care, that I can afford to pay the groceries or pay for childcare? What are you doing? I spoke to the Teamsters last week, packed room, pissed at the Democrats, pissed at the Republicans. By the end of the speech, I had them on their feet applauding because I was saying things that they're not used to Democrats talking about, which is screw all this stuff that talked about up here. What are you doing for me and my family to represent us? I want to get the Democratic Party back to the basics that makes people believe in us again. And first, it is getting rid of corruption. And corruption means that I know my politician isn't bought and paid for, that I know my politician
Except by AIPAC, apparently.
isn't trading stocks on information that I don't have, that I know my politicians aren't playing to somebody else's tune. Second is, what are you doing to make my life economically easier? Because 60% of this country can't afford America anymore, can't afford the American dream. Third, what are we doing for families? Because raising a kid in this country increases your chance of going below the poverty line by over 100% just by having a child, because that's how expensive it is. And again, healthcare, being able to have a child without dying. These are the basics our party wants. People don't want all the bells and whistles. They don't want all the bullshit political talks that we all always get tripped up on. What are you doing for us? And the fight that we're in right now in Washington against Donald Trump, and you and I might agree on a lot of the things, threats to democracy, a lot of these things that we talk about. But when I go home, people are just so pissed off that they can't afford America anymore. And that's what we need to be talking about.
Okay, so we can finish it off there. Amazing sort of ending there as he's criticizing the politician speak and the rhetoric without substance as he's literally doing that himself. I guess he's tossing aside the genocide that he has been complicit in as one of the bells and whistles. That's a distraction point, I guess, and distracting away from more kitchen table issues. But there you have Cory Booker. Again, great job from Jennifer trying to follow up and get specific answers from him and hashing that out. But he's just never going to answer the question directly. Anytime that AIPAC came up, anytime that Netanyahu came up, or the genocide came up, or Israel came up, he would dance around, he would give a half answer, he would give a vague non-answer, or he would completely change the subject or redefine the parameters of the conversation that they were having. And that is what everybody hates right now. Okay, just be direct. Just answer the fucking question. And if you stand on the wrong side of this, then okay, at least just say that. Stop pretending like you've been a champion, you've been a fighter and standing up against Israel and trying to get humanitarian aid in. No, you have not, right? And don't pretend like $871,000 from the pro-Israel lobby, as we know that you're apparently texting the AIPAC president behind the scenes like a goddamn teenager. Don't pretend like this is nothing. Like, oh, you're overestimating the influence that this may have had over me. This is the entirety of our government that's operating like this. Okay, so it's not a throwaway issue. It's not something to just shrug your shoulders at. We are talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that's being dumped into campaigns to remove predominantly left-wing members of Congress on this specific issue. So, okay, again, we'll end off with that on that front from Jennifer Welch there. I want one more clip here that I got to show you guys is Gavin Newsom also being asked about AIPAC and seemingly getting kind of like ticked off that he's even being asked about this at all. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
Interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought about AIPAC. And it's interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
Why
did I say that? Not relevant to my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Which is just interesting.
Listen.
It's interesting you say that. JPAC perhaps more, but AIPAC less and less.
Okay. Fair enough.
Which is just interesting.
What's interesting about it?
That it's just interesting as you bring up AIPAC that it hasn't been part of. I'm just reflecting quite openly and honestly. Hasn't been part of the day to day.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because with that, what I'm talking about is lobbying in and of itself.
Okay, so I guess my question will be, why do you find that so interesting? Again, this is one of the most influential, the most predominant lobbying organizations in the country, especially within the Democratic Party in their primaries, that it seems like they disproportionately focus on. Now, you're trying to tee yourself up, I guess, for like a 2028 presidential run, and you're going to sit there and say that you haven't thought about this organization in years, especially as we've had now 2 years of a full-blown genocide in Gaza, as they've been targeting any candidates who dare to stand up against that genocide or against the apartheid or the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, the expansion of the illegal settlements. You haven't thought about AIPAC as you're teeing yourself up for a presidential run? Really? I mean, again, this is the sort of, I guess, deflecting and dodging of that. That has nothing to do with me. If I run in 2028 and they spend $100 million to get me elected, knowing that I'll be a defender of Israel, then, I guess it is what it is, but I have no comment on it right now. So again, clearly it seems like this has become, number one, a big issue for the Democratic base in terms of taking AIPAC money, in terms of being complicit in the genocide in Gaza. It's a huge issue for the Democratic base. In fact, you could probably make the case that it's a huge reason why Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump in 2024. But it's a big issue on that front, but it doesn't seem like it's relevant to the Democratic Party establishment at all at this point. If anything, it seems like they just don't really want to talk about it at all, which is that much more reason why they have to be questioned on this more and more and more. You have to keep up on this issue, on applying pressure on them so that they don't get to slide by in their complicity in what they've done over the last 2 years, or get to slide by in the next campaign cycle and receive this kind of AIPAC money as if it's nothing, as if it's just sort of a handout for the funsies. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Again, credit to Jennifer Welch and the I've Had It podcast. They do great stuff from what I've seen. And, I hope that people like Cory Booker keep going on independent media, because this is more of what you'll see, right? It's not going to be sort of like a friendly back and forth, zero confrontation that you would see in, mainstream media. So there you have it, guys.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying